Good evening and welcome to today's Tropics for September 24th, 2022. Please note, I'm not a meteorologist. This video is just a collection of my thoughts and opinions for the storm I'm talking about. And for any decision making, please consult National Hurricane Center or your local officials. So, finally gotten a chance to actually record a video after a more intense fall semester so far. Fortunately, I've been kind of busy the past weekend, but since it's the weekend now, I've got some time to record a video right now, and the Atlantic tropics indeed have picked up. We've still got Tropical Storm Gaston here. It's definitely a lot weaker. It's probably going to be a remnant low soon because it can't generate much convection just because it's getting out for those colder waters. We've got Tropical Storm Hermine here. It's way out near the Canary Islands. You don't typically see tropical storms out here, so it's definitely an interesting kind of oddity, but that is also weakening. So we've got kind of these two weakening tropical storms here. Not really anything to worry about. Maybe some land impacts for the Canary Islands, Azores Islands. But the main thing we're watching here is Tropical Storm Ian, which is currently in the Caribbean Sea, Central Caribbean, just south of Jamaica, and that has the potential to become a possibly major hurricane and threaten some islands in the Caribbean and perhaps northeast Gulf Coast, although it's a little too early to tell, and we've also got some enhanced uncertainty. So taking a closer look at Ian, it's looking a lot better now. It was pretty disheveled a lot of today, and that was because it was dealing with the effects from that northeasterly shear, so it was kind of misaligned, not very well organized at all. But it started to get more organized with convection trying to put the mid-level center and the low-level center together, and that's been able to happen with lower shear. So it's definitely an organizing trend. You can see it's kind of a little bit of spin here. It's not too well defined yet, but it's starting to get there, and there's some indications it's getting stronger. Take a look at the water vapor loop. You can see the environment is getting a lot more favorable. You can see healthy outflow to the west or to the north, and then healthy outflow to the east. We haven't seen a lot of this lately. It's been hit by a lot of northeasterly shear, and so that usually kept the outflow kind of from doing much east of the storm, but that's since backed off, and now it's got very healthy outflow to the east, very healthy outflow to basically all directions. You can see the equatorward outflow channel here. There's an upper low over the Cayman Islands, which is helping enhance the upper level pattern. So it's it's already looking very favorable. Low shear and even some of these kind of upper lows nearby that help serve as outflow channels. So you can see that very, very favorable upper level pattern. It's already starting to take shape, and although Ian can't quite take advantage of it because of its kind of structural issues, it's trying to organize, and it will probably be able to take advantage of these conditions probably as soon as tonight or tomorrow. So we had a recon mission going earlier today, and they went in, found a little wind shift here, another wind shift and kind of weakening of winds here, another one here, eventually another one here, and you can see just a whole bunch of different random area of weak winds or wind shifts, and nothing really organized. It looked like a mess on the recon, and it was not aligned with any mid-level center, so it really wasn't looking too healthy. And they flew around to a new area of convection at the time, and they found the mid-level center in the convection, along with this pretty well-defined relative to these other wind shifts, pretty well-defined wind shift. You can see northerly winds and then more easterly winds over here, and they managed to get a vortex data message here. So it might not be quite aligned quite yet, but it's definitely trying to, and the environmental conditions really aren't going to hurt this at this point. I mean, looking back at the water vapor imagery, I mean, there's very moist air, like enough so that you get thunderstorms, which are firing off over, let's say, Jamaica, parts of Cuba, Hispaniola, which already is causing heavy rain, some flooding risks. So even outside the storm, causing some impacts are already. See, it's not very dry at all. It's got very warm waters under it, as is usual for the Caribbean. And again, there really isn't any shear. So this is probably going to blow up as soon as it can get an inner core, and would not be surprising to see it overachieve even the National Hurricane Center forecast. But we'll see what happens, because sometimes there are this kind of inner core hiccups which keep it from getting as strong as it perhaps might be. The big thing we're watching right now is this steering and kind of where it's going to go, because it looks like it's generally headed somewhere over Florida. And so with Florida being a pretty populated state, that means kind of little shifts in where it's going can impact a lot of people. And so there's been or a lot of eyes kind of on where it's tracking. Unfortunately, we can't really have a very good idea of how it's going to look at this point. It's because there's too much uncertainty, but we can kind of get an idea of some of the trends and what things are looking through time. So the kind of two major models, GFS and the Euro, they're kind of two different camps, so to speak. We've got the GFS, which is in the western camp, and it kind of takes it more to the west of a lot of models, and this run it kind of takes it up towards the panhandle, and that is because it is generally less amplified with this trough here, and that allows the ridging to kind of build back in a little bit. And while that doesn't quite turn it to the west, because we're getting into October and you don't usually get those strong ridges like that, but it's enough that it kind of slows down, it kind of drifts north with the flow of the western Atlantic ridge. And so that keeps it from kind of recurving like some of the forecasts had said earlier. And it's also stronger than the Euro, so definitely a good thing that keeps it a little further offshore. And in general, it keeps it more to the south and the west in the nearer term than the Euro here, which is definitely in the east camp. And you can see it has a more well-defined, more amplified trough. And so with the storm that's already northeast of the GFS, it's a lot easier to kind of curve northeastward towards, say, or in this run, I think it's Tampa, but kind of variable. You have shift west or east. It should definitely not take exactly where it goes. It shouldn't take it too seriously, but kind of look at it in the viewpoint of, say, what the trends look like. How things look like changing by run. And so far, we are in a western trend, so that means if you're a little further west, maybe you should keep an extra eye on this. And another little thing, too, is this difference in the strength may actually be influencing track. It's not just the kind of more amplified pattern on the Euro or the less amplified pattern in the GFS, which does kind of help to create these biases in this with the storm. But based on this GFS sounding in the Caribbean, you can see very more southeasterly winds at low levels, but then more easterly winds as you get to the upper levels. So that means a weaker system, say like the Euro, is going to try to curve north more quickly and perhaps run aground Cuba, generally being more to the northeast as it's in that more southeasterly or even southeasterly flow. Meanwhile, if you have a model like the GFS, which really ramps it up and is stronger and honestly a little more realistic, it starts to feel some of that steering a little further up, and that means it doesn't quite travel as much to the northwest. Instead, maybe travels a little bit more the west, and that's exactly what the GFS does with the storm. And so what we're looking at is probably a stronger storm in the Caribbean, traveling a bit more to the west. So we'll have to monitor those trends in the near term. to see if it's those kind of short-term little trends. At the same time, we're also seeing a trend for a bit in favor of the GFS here, with a trough that isn't quite as amplified. See, the past few runs, you had that 580 decameter line kind of getting to South Carolina, but now it's backing off into almost into Virginia, and that means this ridge can kind of build in earlier, and that means with Ian also trending slower and more south in the Caribbean and getting into the Gulf, that means higher and higher chances that it ends up missing the trough and kind of drifting to the north rather than kind of going way out northeast through Florida and maybe out to sea. So it looks like it's more likely to kind of slow down and drift over the North Atlantic, or then what am I saying? The Gulf of Mexico. And yeah, the Euro also agrees with this. Kind of has this ridge nose in to kind of into the south, and so that means maybe a little less likely you have that quick recurve. And you see that has kind of caused its own southwesterly trend, but if it kind of gets stronger with the intensity, which probably be more realistic at this point, it might trend even further southwest, and perhaps a bit more in line with the GFS model. Now, at this point, given the uncertainties, it's not the best idea to look at those deterministic models, and that's why we have ensemble models, because they really give you a good idea of how much uncertainty there is in the kind of envelope of risk here. And what we have over here, a great plot from Tomerberg, and this shows the ensembles for basically most of the major models, and you can see a pretty wide envelope of tracks that can really take here. Basically anywhere from say almost Yucatan Peninsula into the Central Gulf is like the extreme southwestern solutions, but also something like the kind of forecast we're seeing earlier, kind of take it over Cuba and maybe South Florida. Those are like the extreme northeastern solutions. It's most likely to be in the middle, where you kind of have kind of between the deterministic GFS and Euro. But you can see the uncertainty here, and hopefully it gives a good idea of to people like who may think that they're out of the woods. There is a risk of something going, or Ian kind of coming up into your region. Definitely not let your guard down. Probably good rules until it passes by your latitude. So with the possibility of that kind of drift in the north, or in the Gulf Coast, or near the Gulf Coast, the one good thing is we're probably not going to have a very strong system that's going to enter that enters the southern Gulf and kind of heads towards the Gulf Coast as that strong storm. It's likely going to be strong for a little while in the Gulf, but then as it perhaps misses the trough, what would happen then is you'd have still have a lot of westerly winds aloft as it kind of stalls out, and that means you'd have some westerly shear hit the storm, and that also means on the back end of trough you have a lot of that cooler, drier continental air, and that is kind of shown to wrap around Ian on some of these model runs. And what that shear and dry air does is it really gets into the storm and weakens a lot before it makes landfall. So if it does miss the trough, we're probably going to see it kind of drift around slowly northward, but also weaken because these unfavorable conditions kind of impinging on it as it approaches the coast. So that's honestly one of the better solutions, if we can kind of get it to drift and then weaken, so that even though we're going to have likely a strong major hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico early next week, hopefully these conditions can minimize the impacts once it comes ashore somewhere. Now, do caution, if we have say a sudden or sudden increase in the strength of the trough or something, and it does recurve, it might not feel as much of these unfavorable conditions come ashore as a stronger cyclone, but so far it does seem that chances are increasing that it will trough, or it may miss the trough and it can drift around and hopefully weaken, because we can avoid major impacts. That's definitely a good thing. Let's take a look at the official NHC cone here. You can see that kind of travels generally westerly for the next little while, but trough starts trying to pick it up, and it's likely to travel generally northwestward and then northward as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. Hey, as I said earlier, it's kind of causing some rains in this region, which is totally removed from the system center. So definitely don't let your guard down even if you're further out from here. And then probably going to be past nearby Cayman Islands. You got tropical storm watch and hurricane warning up here. So make sure your preparations are about done there, because Ian is coming by, likely be possibly rapidly intensifying system as it passes by your area sometime Monday, likely earlier in the day. And then eventually, definitely a risk of a potentially damaging major hurricane. This forecast getting up to Category 4 hurricane in western Cuba. Depending on where it tracks, could get a bit more west based on trends, but it's definitely a risk for this area of Cuba, and then eventually kind of curving up north a bit towards some part of Florida, most likely. But tomorrow we'll get a better idea of how much the inner core is potentially trying to get going, and some more trends of the extratropical pattern, which will give us a better idea of how things will look. But for now, if you're really anywhere near the cone, say from Alabama here to like most of the west coast of Florida, even kind of near the east coast where it might come offshore, don't let your guard down until like it's basically past your latitude, because you can have unexpected shifts, and it's really better to keep prepared and keep a close eye on the system, because it has potential to be damaging. But hopefully we get this kind of weakening come on strong before it heads on shore. But fortunately, high uncertainty. So we'll see what happens. But as far as that's about all we know for now. If you have any questions or comments about my video, please let me know. Thanks for watching.